I'll go ahead and call us to order and declare that we have a quorum present of 7 members. Takes us to C1, consideration discussion related to School Health Advisory Committee recommendations for the 2018-19 school year. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, members of the board. As you recall, school districts in Texas have school health advisory committees, and we have had those in the state since the late 1990s. And part of what a school health advisory committee does is make recommendations in an advisory capacity to the Board of Trustees. And ours in College Station ISD typically does that in April. Last year, SHAC committee did come and make a presentation to the board in April and made several recommendations in regards to things like health curriculum, recess, and the use of electronic devices. We made some changes in district practice that we announced this summer at our July meeting, and we wanted to just give an update to the board and the community about where we are in those respective adjustments that we've made. I've asked Molly Perry, our Chief Administrative Officer, to come and take us through the presentation. Mrs. Perry.
Thank you, Dr. Ely. Good evening, members of the board. So as Dr. Ely mentioned, we had a number of recommendations, and the plan this evening is really just to walk through each of those and provide a little bit of background as well as an update on where we are with any changes. So we'll just jump right in and start with recess. So the first recommendation related specifically to elementaries and the punishment of restricting recess for students who may have some challenges with behavior or need to complete homework, things of those nature. And so the recommendation was to prohibit the removal or restriction of recess as a punishment. And we had our group of elementary principals come together and really consider what was happening as a practice and what we wanted to do moving forward. And so our current elementary student handbook does discuss recess specifically. The decision was that teachers can determine that a student would be removed for recess for up to 10 minutes, but not so much for punishment, but as practice time for academic or behavioral skills. This is not for a time that we would engage in any sort of punitive tasks like walking the track or things of that nature, but the only person on a campus that would be able to restrict an entire recess would now be the campus administrator. So the second recommendation was related to health curriculum, and it really looked at a specific consideration for us to work with Texas A&M University to revamp our curriculum and specifically focus on addressing mental health and related needs. And so here in College Station ISD, our health is called wellness, and because it's really a much more broad topic and it's aligned to the TEKS that are the required components that the state makes us implement for those courses. And so we have already completed that first module for mental health, and it is expected that we'll be able to implement that in spring 19. We're just putting the final touches, aligning that with our understanding by design framework that we're using for all of our curriculum revisions. And so we plan that we'll be able to go ahead and move forward with that quickly and then work on additional modules in the spring and summer to move forward. The next several recommendations related to electronic device regulation. And so the first recommendation was really specifically centered around student use of their personal devices, so cell phones and the like, and wanted to really restrict that only to educational use. And so, again, we brought together our principals to really provide good feedback about how students were currently allowed to use their personal devices and came to consensus on what we would be doing going forward. And so we have, again, in our student handbook, a statement that really talks about the purpose of allowing the Bring Your Own Device initiative, that really it is designed for instructional purpose, but of course there are times during the day where students can use them for personal use, and so we'll look at what that specifically entails as well. So here we have a chart that really just gives a visual of what is specified across our student handbooks in terms of what is allowed. And you'll see as students matriculate up through the grade spans, their access to their own personal devices does expand. So of course, at all grade levels, pending permission of a teacher, students can use those in instructional settings for instructional purposes. Once a student moves up to intermediate, they are allowable before or after school on campus. And then in middle and high school, We do allow the use at lunch, and then finally, high school is also allowed during passing periods. So the next component also related to device use with personal devices and strengthening our filters. So we previously did have public access for our Wi-Fi, but it was relatively open. Not that you could go to any website or look up anything you wanted, but you could access that Wi-Fi with really without any authentication of who you were. So you might be a student, you might be a guest, you might be somebody in the parking lot that happened to be close enough to the building to be able to access the Wi-Fi. And after the recommendations, our technology department worked very hard to implement a very different way in terms of filtering and authentication. So much like when you go to public places, hotels, restaurants, you now have to log in. So for our staff and our students, they are going to be using that same login that they use anytime they would log into a computer. So no different password, same username. And for guests, when you pull up your device and you want to access the public Wi-Fi, you would need to go through that same authentication process where you put in your information. You will have a 10-minute window where you do have open access to be able to check your email, get your code, and then log in. So for those guests on our Wi-Fi, that refreshes every night. So if you came back tomorrow, you'd need to do that again. For our staff and our students who do have CSISD accounts, that stays active once you log in until you've been off of the network for 3 weeks. So it's really not a disruption as far as students having to log in every day, but they are authenticated and we can quickly see who's accessing what. The other component of that is really looking at what is accessible for students. And our technology department worked with our curriculum department in determining what would be allowable at what levels. And so, for example, if I'm a third grade student, I'm going to have a more restricted access to Wi-Fi in terms of what I can view and see than if I'm a high school student. And that's based upon my grade level, not my location. So if I'm at a high school football game on Friday night, my access on the Wi-Fi will be the same as if I were at my elementary school. So the next component is looking at a technology safety curriculum. And it was timely that the SHAC saw this as a need because we actually, with our District Educational Improvement Council, or DEIC, really had already been in discussions about what we are doing to make sure that we are teaching our kiddos to be responsible digital citizens, learning about a digital footprint and how to keep themselves safe on the internet and so on and so forth. And as part of that process, we also incorporated the need to be a responsible digital citizen in our learner profile. So several things have happened since that time. One, we identified that we would be using a curriculum through Common Sense Education to provide instruction. We developed a year-at-a-glance document for our K-8 grade levels, so we would know what specifically would be taught. Here are the instructional resources and the lessons along what time frame throughout the year. We're doing this through Nearpod, which is something that we've purchased not just for digital citizenship, but really as an instructional tool across the content areas. It was a great bonus that they had paired up with Common Sense Education for this digital citizenship component as well. And so we're actually doing this for our elementary kiddos during their camp rotation time, that computer, art, music, PE. And then 5-8 during their advisory advocate. Each campus has a little bit different name for that time, but there is built-in time during the day. So this is just a quick little glance at what that curriculum entails, and you can kind of see across the grade spans how the different components are incorporated in different ways. And as I mentioned, it's really beyond just understanding how to use the internet safely, but also communication and cyberbullying and copyright laws even. So lots of good information that our students will be learning. We are requiring this K-8. It's optional at this point for high school, so I'm sure we'll be continuing to discuss that as well. And then parent education is the last component of our device regulation recommendations. And again, our DEIC had already identified this, so it aligned very nicely with that need to make sure that we have good information out there and available for our parents. And so there's a few ways that we're addressing this. One, that curriculum that I just mentioned through Nearpod with Common Sense Education does include a number of parent resources that we're encouraging our teachers to turn around and share. And that is all open access once they send that out. It's linked into our curriculum year-at-a-glance documents that we have provided as well. And coming in January, in our platform, Schoology, we're going to be rolling out a CSISD Parent Learning Center. And so this will be beyond just digital citizenship and safety, but it will really be a place where our parents can go and access a variety of information related to needs that they may have. And so this is actually done through Who Knew It, which is another platform that we are using and transitioning to for a lot of our required trainings, but it will be embedded in Schoology. So folks will not have to go multiple places, but really can go to that Parent Learning Center and access resources and courses all in one-stop shop. And so you can see some examples there on the right under Who Knew It of the types of courses that are available. And with that, I'd love to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you for that report. And if there are any members of SHAC in the audience, thank you all. I see a couple out there. That I remember when that report was given, I think we all were very impressed with those recommendations. And I thank the administration for taking them to heart and really making some, what I view as positive impact in students' and parents' lives. I can tell you the parent piece is particularly important to me because the people that I would be trying to police on the devices know a whole lot more about it than I do, and that makes it very difficult. So at least some information that I can get and maybe help guide them is great. So thank you very much. Other comments, questions?
I just wondered if you guys have gotten any feedback from any of the schools, any of the administrators on the changes, any feedback at all?
You know, at this point, I haven't specifically, but some of our other folks may have, so I'd have to gather a little more info. I'd be
I
happy
was
to.
wondering if they like the changes, just what they think about the changes.
I think we've gotten just a little bit of feedback, and I think most of our teachers and administrators are for many of the changes. As in any large organization, you will run into people who would want more and more access to be granted, and some who would want less and less. So what was incumbent upon us was trying to find the happy medium and what makes the most sense in an educational environment while still, as an educational institution, being able to give kids more and more freedom as they moved along so they can learn how to operate within the gradually increasing amount of freedom. So we think we've struck the right balance on that. If we haven't, we'll continue to be something we will evaluate and make changes if we need to moving forward.
Great. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Berry.
Before we go to C2, I want to recognize that we actually have 8 trustees present. Amanda Green, who is trustee-elect, is also present, sitting in the second row. So sorry to not do you earlier. Okay, C2, consideration and discussion related to the annual enrollment review and report. FC Local, Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This is our annual enrollment review and report to the Board of Trustees, which is a component of board policy. FC Local is our second opportunity to provide an enrollment report to the board. We do this per policy during December. The reason why we do it during December is we try to use the most current information we can get, and that that information is reported to the state from the fourth Friday in October, what we call our snapshot date. So we take all of our snapshot date information every year and send it to the state. And now we take that snapshot information from the fourth Friday in October and send it to our demographers for them to make their enrollment projections and report for us. And so that's why we have this in December at this time. So what we have here is a couple things that are called for in policy, and Mr. Martindale, our Deputy Superintendent and Chief Financial Officer, will take us through the report. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Dr. Ely. As called for by FC Local in our annual enrollment review, what we would provide the board every December is a 5-year projection. Again, all the projections you'll see this evening are based on our most recent snapshot data that was submitted at the end of October. So that's the information or the data that the demographers used from elementary through high school. But we'll provide that 5-year projection that Templeton Demographics provided us. In addition to that, we'll take our capacity numbers for each of our facilities and apply kind of the bookends of 85% to 110%. So we can kind of take a look and see how we're tracking from a facility utilization standpoint. In addition to that, for our secondary or our 5 through 12 campuses, we'll look at our economically disadvantaged percentages. For 5 through 8, kind of the marker we use is a variance of 15 percentage points to determine comparability. And for, excuse me, it's got me all choked up already. For our high schools, 9 through 12, we're looking at a variance of no more than 12 percentage points. So those are particular things that we'll look for as we move through our 5-year projections. First, an overall look. This is what Templeton is projecting at this point in time for the next 5 years from an enrollment, district enrollment standpoint. So obviously in 18-19, we've lost some enrollment. We anticipated that. Actually, when we were, if you recall, when we built this year's budget, we projected a loss of 1%. So at snapshot, we were down 0.8% with in relation to enrollment from last year to this October. For 19-20, they're projecting a 2.9% growth. Moving to 2020-21 is 3.2%, and that will bring us over the 14,000 student mark, 2.5, 2.8, again, expecting to go over 15,000 students in 22-23, and 2.4%. These are a little bit lighter than previous numbers we've been given by the demographer. I know that the most recent that I got from them last spring had us closer to the 4% mark as opposed to 2.9. So not as aggressive growth as we've seen the last couple of years, but growing still nonetheless. This is our high school, our elementary schools. As this will look somewhat familiar to you because we spent a lot of time with this earlier this fall. But let me just kind of, I'll go with College Hills across the top so you just kind of touch base on exactly what all the numbers are. So here's our capacity number for that particular campus, 660 students for College Hills. We apply the 85 to 110% mark to kind of grab our window of our capacity utilization numbers that we identify in policy. And these, of course, are projected enrollments in the out years for each of those corresponding years.
18-19 is actual.
18-19, excuse me, is not a projection. That's actual PEIMS that was submitted at the end of October. That'll be the case for all of our campuses through the report. So College Hills in October was at 708, projecting at 626 next year to 643. 645, 665, and 677. And that works for all the particular campuses. You can see the capacity number and the window we're looking for as far as with 85% to 110%. If you recall, the shading, we utilize shading for green. That's signifying that that projected enrollment is below that 85% mark. As you can see with Creekview, a couple of years where they're just below the 544 mark, and then they come back within that range that we're looking for. We'll take a look at Greens Prairie, a capacity of 660. Our window is 561 to 726. Current year, again, this year's is 743. That's outside of that 726. That's why we have this one shaded in red. Just kind of brings those numbers out. Helps us to see our areas easier with all the numbers. Next year with opening of River Bend, and we bring Greens Prairie projected down to 556, and then it starts growing again. And I'll touch on one more or two more of these before we move to our intermediates. Pebble Creek, 431 this year. With our work this fall, we're anticipating them opening next year at 540, and you can see how they progress over the next several years with a projection of 693 and 737 in those out years. And again, this is assuming the projections with the development on the southern end in the racetrack area keep track. Of course, you can see our newest elementary coming aboard in River Bend right here with the facility capacity of 660. I'm coming in the 440 range in 1920. Any particular questions associated with the elementaries before I move to the next one? These are numbers very similar to, again, what you saw this fall. Again, these are from October PEMS. Our intermediates, I'll start with Cypress Grove. Capacity of 920 is what we use, so that capacity utilization window is 782 to 1012. Turned in, they are at 667 as of PEM snapshot this year, projected at 693. Next year, 701, 689, 696, 643. So same methodology. You see the utilization, the facility number we use for Oakwood Pecan Trail, and how those are projecting out in 1920 and beyond. Again, these 1819 are actuals from PEM submission. The green shading, again, tells us that's under that 85% mark, which really is something we should anticipate since Pecan Trail has only been open for 2 years. This just shows we're positioned well at the 5 and 6 grade levels for the foreseeable future with the addition of Pecan Trail. This is what we would expect to see with the brand new campus coming aboard. The next component is for comparability. So Cypress Grove, this is our economically disadvantaged percentage. Again, this is what was submitted with our October snapshot, 36.28% for Cypress Grove. Oakwood, 47.02%, and Pecan Trail, 25.03%. I look for just the largest variance between the campuses we have. So for example, Cypress Grove is 36.28. I know the largest variance between the other two existing intermediates is with Pecan Trail, and that's a difference of 11.25%. They're the same with Oakwood, 47.02. The biggest difference is with Pecan Trail at 25.03, so there's a variance of 21.99 percentage points on our economically disadvantaged between these two campuses. Now something, and we'll go to our 7-8, think about our 5 through 8 zones are the same. So you're going to see a shift in these numbers. Remember our dual language programming is at Oakwood, and that can influence or be a variable in this percentage. I think we look at our 7-8, it will give us more of a closer indication when we remove influencers like the dual language programming. Questions on 5, 6? Okay. Here's our 7-8. And again, same setup as all of them. An example, A&M Consolidated Middle School, capacity 920. Here's our window, and we look at our percentages. Turn in 706 for them this year, and we're projected to go 703, 725, and out to 711 and 23, 24. See the same for each of the middle schools. Welborn opened this year, capacity at 925. The capacity window on that 786 to 1,018. They were at 620 at Peems, projected to go is 727 next year, reach the 800 mark, and then kind of stable off in there for the foreseeable future. So again, lots of green, but again, with Welborn being new, this is kind of what we'd expect to see to situate us for the future. Economically disadvantaged numbers for us. As soon as I can get this pointer to work, sorry. A&M Consolidated Middle School, 39.09%, CSMS 34.92, and Welborn 27.42. So again, I looked for the two campuses with the greatest variance. A&M Consolidated Middle School and Welborn have a variance of 11.67%. At these grade levels, we're looking for a variance less than 15%, if you recall. College Station Middle School and Welborn are 7.5%. And of course, I just touched on Welborn and A&M Consolidated Middle School. So these are situated nicely for us as far as 15% is considered. And again, you don't have the dual language programming at the 7 and 8 campus that you're experiencing at the 5, 6. So I think that does influence this because these zones for 5 through 8 are exactly the same. Questions? Okay. Our high schools. So again, A&M Consolidated High School 2350. These are our windows for capacity, 1998 to just shy of 2600. College Station High School in 1950. And if we look at those percentages, 1658 to 2145. This is the numbers we submitted at Peems, 1763 and 2009. And I can tell you from last year's Peems to this year, Consolidated is up 47 over last year's submission, and College Station High School is up 12 over last year's submission. This is submission to submission. Enrollment numbers move every day. So let me just say that real quick. This is snapshot to snapshot, okay? Projecting out, these are with the high school zones that will be implemented next fall. So you can see Consol at 1991 to 2060, 2180, 2283, and right at 2400. College Station High School now at 2009, 1946, 2014, 2098, and we get 2194 and 2246. And again, the shading indicates we're using these capacity numbers in the 85 and 110% mark. Now, you might ask, what about grandfathering?
These numbers
Do not include any impact of grandfathering. This is strictly reside address and zone. No, I don't. Actually, any questions? No. Okay.
Well, we think that next year's seniors and juniors who would be subject to move, probably most of them will exercise their opportunity to grandfather and stay at their current school.
So I'm going to show you through the math that we used because I think it'll be a truer indication of what the high schools will actually look like the next 2 years as the grandfathering works its way through with current year sophomores and juniors. So next year, juniors and seniors, okay? When we look at those eligible to grandfather at College Station High School, we have, a total eligible next year of 190. At Consol, there are 55 eligible to grandfather. So that's a net impact of a difference of 135 students, okay, that we're looking at, that we've got to back out of Consol and add back into the College Station High School. This difference, okay? So that's what we'll do. So we'll use the 135, and we're going to work off of 1920. That's what we're looking at next year. So we're going to take these projected numbers with no grandfathering impact whatsoever and apply the difference of 135 if everybody eligible grandfathered at the two schools. Okay. That would bring our numbers here. So it's just basically 1991 backing out 135 from Consol to bring them to 1856. 1946 at CSHS, adding back 135 because the difference of everyone grandfathering at 2081. So it's just an add and subtract back if we assume everyone that's eligible will grandfather. So this may be more of the reality as opposed to this, depending on those kiddos that choose to grandfather or not.
So does that make sense to everyone?
Somewhere in between is what would be. Okay. So we have a second year of the grandfathering. So this would be next year's juniors and the following year's seniors. Okay. So we're looking at a net difference of 71 this time because one grade level has graduated out. Okay. We'll take that 71, and again, we're looking at 2021 now. So now we'll do the backwards math with 71 now to give us an indication of that last year of the grandfathering impact. To get us to 1989 and 2085 for that second year. Again, this is assuming 100% of the kids eligible grandfather. And then I just added out, after that, your impact of grandfathering should remove itself and it should set to the projections that I have in the very first slide. Questions on those numbers? And the economically disadvantaged percentages for the high school as of our submission this October, Consol 35.34, College Station 23.44. The number we watch for this variance is 12%. We're at 11.9, which is, this is lower than last year. Questions? Lots of numbers, I apologize.
No, thank you for that. Actually, that one report I thought was incredibly well done, how you broke all the grandfathering down and showed the impact. And just for everyone's edification, I want to point out something we talked about at the executive committee. You'll notice that our item is just consideration and discussion related to annual enrollment review and report. And part of that is you'll see what's not there is action. There are a couple of things. We anticipated that if we would need to, we would do that at a later date. And the other thing we did not add on that was an actual discussion of FC local. And we would anticipate doing that at some time later in the spring for two reasons. One, we wanted to decouple it from the actual use of the policy, what we're doing now. But also because of the timing, we wanted to wait until our new board was fully in place. We didn't want to do anything here in this setting, and because of the quirks of when dates fell, that Mrs. Green wouldn't be able to participate in that. So all of that will take place later in the spring as needed. So I just wanted to point those out. Now, back to the report at hand. Any questions, comments, concerns?
I like all that green. Having done this now for however many years it's been, 5 years, it's finally satisfying to, we've built a lot of schools in a really, really short period of time. And it is a real blessing, I think, for us as a district to be able to look in the out years and see that we are 5 and 6 years away, hopefully, from having schools that are us having to go through big giant issues or build a lot of buildings again. And it hopefully, given the funding situation we have, I think at the state level, we're going to be in a much better position not having to go around building buildings nonstop and adding things that we're going to have to pay for. And so I think you guys are to be commended for the outward planning that you guys have done and put us in the spot where we're going to be good for a little while. And I guess that's going to be really important given the bind the Texas legislature is currently putting us in from a funding perspective. And I'd just say well done and kudos to you guys and your teams for leaving us with a bunch of green and, as we will hear tonight, being in very good shape financially, I think, as we move forward. So I'd say well done.
Thank you, Dr. Wesson.
Did you have anything on College View, or did I miss that, or
I'm sorry.
College View?
I did not. I focused on the comprehensive high schools.
I was just curious what
So,
their out years looked like, capacity-wise.
We can bring that. And that's, that's more of a judgment. They don't have a, College View is a school of choice, so they don't have an attendance zone that they're drawing from that you can make cohort survival projections on. So we can get that to you. But it's just, this is more about the comprehensive campuses.
Cohort survival projections. Wow.
Cohort survival doesn't sound good. It sounds like things are not going well at school, but
Survival.
no, that's the technical term.
I got it.
I just want to echo what Dr. Wesson said. After a campus a year for half a decade, it's nice to look at those numbers and know that we're a ways away from needing another one, hopefully. So, additional kudos.
Thank you.
Is nice. I guess that it, unless somebody else has anything. Okay, I guess
Okay.
with that, we're adjourned.
All right, thank you.